Fill all my vision, every desire. Keep for your glory, my soul inspired. And with your perfection and your holy love, flooding my pathway with light from above. And fill all my vision, Savior divine, till with your glory my spirit shall shine. And fill all my vision, that all may see your holy image reflected in me, reflected in me.
Good afternoon and welcome to Coffee and Conversations. My name is Jason Goodson. I'm here with Johnny Taylor, and today we have a guest with us. Where are you from, Mark?
I am from New Orleans, Louisiana.
Okay, I didn't want to get the I was gonna say something in that general area, but I wasn't sure. So
well, I would prefer to be known as being a Covingtonian, but a lot of people don't know where Covington, Louisiana
is. Listen, that's exactly what I was thinking. It was Covington.
North of Lake Pontchartrain, rather than south of Lake Pontchartrain.
Right.
Well, Mark Leach is joining us today, and he is one of our dear friends that we have known since, I believe, the year of '96 was when you started out at Lake Forest Ranch, working as the assistant director. And we met then, and Mark is a dear friend of ours, and we're glad to have you here with us today. Mark, welcome.
Good to be here. Want to play some basketball, Jason?
Yeah, I met Mark about a month after I was probably, I don't know, do you remember what month that was? It was in '96. I believe it was like March, I believe.
Yeah, it was a little bit cool.
Yeah, it was cool. And I rode up with Philip Wood, and I drove over to deliver our resumes to work as counselors at Lake Forest Ranch that summer. And we had previously, Philip and I had previously worked on staff as work staff in the early '90s, and we had been out of the picture of LFR for a while, and they had switched over directors, and of course Mark had just come in as assistant director, and we drove from East Texas in March. It's about a month. I think it was right at 1 month after I got arrested in February.
I failed to mention that
on the application.
I didn't see that under qualifications. Knows how to get out of jail.
I'm telling you what, there was a lot of stressful moments in those times where we were those 4 weeks afterwards. Anyway, it's a long story. We'll talk about it later. But people are going, "Oh, what did you do to get arrested, man?" Anyways, but that's when we drove out there and we hand delivered our resumes all the way from East Texas. We thought that'd impress everybody, and
just
apparently
crazy.
Showing up at Rich's door, when he opened that door to see his face, was like hello, he said. I just remember the first thing was like,
that sounds like him.
Yeah. He was like, who are y'all? Kind of one of those things. We introduced ourselves and told him what we were doing. He invited us right in and sat on his couch. And, of course, Trey was still talking like Mickey Mouse then. And he was, and so everything was really strange because it was just a whole new experience for us. But I believe we walked down, and that's, I can't remember if it was, no, you did walk in over at Rich's house, didn't you?
Yeah, I noticed some young lads, strong lads, and Rich had a bum knee, so I could never play basketball with him. And there were two of you, and I had my buddy Gary Francis up, so it was perfect.
Yeah.
It was like a gift. It was like manna from heaven.
Oh, man. If you ever seen me play basketball, it's a really rough sight. I gave it up. I gave it up in the 8th grade. After I killed a few guys on the court, it was, coach never played me. And
now you don't want to play his wife, though.
No, Kathy can play some basketball.
There you
go. Coach would put me in to foul people.
That's a good thing. That's a good role.
Yeah, but I just got tired of running up and down the court just to foul somebody. So, but for me, I enjoyed hitting people. That was more of my style. So that's how I met Mark, and you got to know Mark. Worked with him that summer. He was our assistant director, and we all kind of, bit into the Lake Forest summer as a staff for the first time together. And I really love Mark, and Mark has always been patient, and he's always been patient. Even that second summer, he was. The second summer, that whole staff was interesting, so we had a good time that second summer as well. And anyways, Mark, we just wanted to hear from you today. We're gonna kind of introduce you to our listeners, and just kind of just talk about what God has been doing in your life, and maybe we can in this process just find out what God's doing today in this whole process, and what we're doing with the podcast. And we're really excited about a few things here that's going on. We've had a great meeting last night with our Monday night group. We met at a house kind of a new house for us to meet at, my nephew's place, and had some friends of ours show up that we'd never met before, and it was a really interesting evening, and just looking forward to seeing what God's going to do there with that whole thing. So, Mark, how things going with you? What's going on now with you? What's family like? How's your wife, and how things going there?
I would say things are going pretty well these days. I am at a place in life where I can look back on some things.
Right.
And wouldn't necessarily want to go through some of those things again, but it's nice to see how some of it has turned out.
Right.
And kids are getting older. I think you remember Zach from camp.
I do.
You and Johnny.
Yeah.
And he's a little guy. Well, now he's a big 6'1", lanky dude with long hair.
Right.
In fact, he's been on staff at camp.
Right.
A couple of years ago, and I have 4.
Wow.
I think I had 2 of them.
Yeah, you had 2.
After we left Lake Forest.
Okay.
And God did a big thing in my life in the process of going out to Lake Forest and then coming back. I would say that where I was going into Lake Forest was due to some pain in my life, in family life, and dashed expectations and things like that. I was in a place where I was a little bit closed off, maybe more than a little bit. Tried to control things a good bit. And for the most part, I knew God loved me, but I also had quite a bit of pride, still do, but didn't even see it. That, if someone walks the Christian life, they can expect good things.
All right.
And, for example, when I went out to Lake Forest, I'm like, hey, I'm going to go out to the perfect place, work for the perfect guy, and everything's just going to be hunky-dory, almost like the Garden of Eden. It was such a naive, kind of stupid mentality to have, or immature. The problem is, if there is a perfect place on earth, which there isn't, I'm there, and that's a problem. Because I'm not perfect. So God called me out of kind of corporate America, which I had enough of, sure. And, I think I had a longing to be more plugged into some ministry and doing some things, and it was a good fit there. And I very much enjoyed the staff out there and the process out at Lake Forest. Sometimes I found it intrusive and difficult. It's tough having a family out there,
right?
Because the boundaries, the ministry of Lake Forest can be all consuming. And then we had these seasons going on, and it's tough to deal with it sometimes. But God was beginning to open me back up, okay, and not be so much in control. But there were some places I wasn't going to voluntarily go. And when we were out there the second summer, we knew something was going on with Stephen. He's my second born.
Right.
So Stephen wasn't talking, and Noelle was having a very difficult pregnancy with Anna. And
right.
you guys, can you hear me?
Yep. Yeah, we got you.
Okay. She was completely cut off from that camp. And I think God used that difficult process of her having a tough summer and going through the personal things where we would be open to even leaving if we had to. And got toward the end of the summer. Well, we finished the summer, got all that behind us, and had Stephen checked out, and it was confirmed that he had a serious problem. They called it pervasive developmental disorder, which after a couple of years we figured out really what it was autism.
Yeah.
And so the weight that immediately came on me is that we didn't really see that it was a good match anymore. You know, Lake Forest is a special place. It doesn't always fit with where a person is in their life. And suddenly we're in a position with the family needs of it not being a good fit anymore. The good news was God confirmed or honored I wanted to help. We wanted to find help for Stephen. Noelle was ready to get some help, hoping to maybe get closer to family with our growing family need. And sure enough, God opened the doors and got some good job opportunities. The curveball really came in when I thought I was going for a job. It looked like it was in the bag kind of job. It's a general management job. I would be a general manager at a company in Covington. And then I kind of had a backup with Shell Oil where it was more of the job I hate, right?
Right.
And so I resigned from Lake Forest, really believing in my mind I had the job that I would like. And no sooner than I resigned, that fell through. But I was okay. You know, we've got good moving money. We've got to take care of the family needs. Let's go back. Yeah. And we were getting to move back to my hometown, and I would commute into New Orleans. Well, of course, you got to find a house, and we just had Anna in November, which was a month before we moved. We're getting everything, trying to get everything ready for Stephen. We moved back. I show up for work, and the only thing I could honestly tell you that happened is that I had a nervous breakdown. And, you know, I found out later that there's like 5 major triggers in life, and I had 4 of the major triggers hit at the same time.
Wow. Yeah, that can.
And I had a panic attack. I don't know if you've ever heard of anything like that, but it was rough. So that then subsided into a huge so bad that my pastor came and he brought someone who was a medical doctor in the congregation to also address anything physical going on, because I have a family history of this. My mom was institutionalized when I was 11 years old. And, of course, facing this in myself was a horrifying fear. And being on the edge of that. And it was a brutal month or so trying to wade through all that. And I did need some medical attention. I needed counseling. But one thing spiritually God was doing in me is he was having me deal with a lifelong coping mechanism that affected relationships. And that was what happened with my mom and I when she crashed. You know, basically as a family, we didn't know how to handle it. And we just said, okay, Mom, you chose it. It's your fault. You messed everything up. And that basically the only reason you're having all that is because of sin. And so I had to face that square on. And a lot of healing came through that process, particularly with my mother.
Yeah.
Also, it changed me in the sense of, I would say I was a significantly more compassionate person after going through that process, empathetic. Now, there are some things, though, that it's really easy to do when it looks like, where I was God's mad at me.
Mm.
I took a wrong turn here. I really messed up. I mean, I even went back up to the camp and I broke down crying, just, Rich, can you take me back? I made a big mistake.
Right.
It was too late. And, I got great validation. Everybody saying you're doing the right thing. You're doing the unselfish thing. And I said, but it feels so wrong. It just feels horrible. I had no joy, no peace. But the only thing I could say is, yes, I know God's there, and I still believe I'd go to heaven, but I was ready for it right now. I just didn't want to keep going. So, but there was a turning point, and there was one verse that I was really struggling. Noelle, it was getting hard on her, and God brought a verse to mind in Hebrews, and I had it up, but it's basically God takes pleasure in faith, and not the one that shrinks back. In fact, I'm gonna get it back up here because I don't want to garble this thing too bad. And it was a turning point for me because I was shrinking back.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was really becoming an issue of faith of, well, do I trust God with where He has me when all the senses are against me trusting Him? And I'm probably not going to be able to find it, but it's in Hebrews. And
let me see.
10:38, Hebrews 10:38. I can just look it up the verse. Can you read it?
It says, "But my righteous one shall live by faith, and if he shrinks back, my soul has no pleasure in him."
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
So that's what he brought to my mind, and it just painted a picture that I just need to take the next step. I don't know how I'm going to get up, go to work in the morning when I just feel like life is meaningless, but I got to take a step.
Right.
And I got to do the next thing and the next thing. And, I kind of thought about when King David faced Goliath, right? All the Israelites, they're brave until they see Goliath, and then they all shrink back, right?
Right.
Yeah.
They're scared.
Right.
And in a sense, that's where I was at that moment. And
Wow.
so it was a process over about a year, and I really didn't see any hope as far as, well, I guess I'll just be doing this the rest of my life. And of course, I guess I did the right things. I attended church. I wanted to serve, and I served. But it was certainly not the feelings driving it. It was more, I just know this is what's good for me. And sure enough, things began to look better. Job situation changed. I ended up working at that place that I wanted to work at.
Right.
And my life started opening up to people a lot more than before I had gone out to Lake Forest.
Right.
If someone suddenly popped in the house and it wasn't planned, it was like, oh, great, and let's minister, let's see what's going on, and desire to be part of small groups or be involved with that. Also, just being a more forgiving person.
Right.
And I think it prepared me for some things to come with child rearing. Because there's one thing you can't control in life is your children.
Right. I'm learning this, my friend.
Especially your firstborn, your headstrong firstborn. That's not always true. But so, I guess what I learned through that whole process is true faith is really demonstrated when all the sensory things aren't there.
Right.
Because if you see or you hear or you feel, you're kind of leaning on the seen and not the unseen.
Right.
Yeah.
But I guess, aside from me having to heal from some things and face some things, I guess after a while I was able to see it as, God, you're giving me a gift here of demonstrating a real faith, a more stronger faith or a purer faith. In the sense that Abraham left Ur and he goes out to the middle of nowhere based on God tells him something, and it's very sketchy at best.
Right.
Yeah.
And having gone through that, it's given me the courage to do a lot of different things, including being self-employed for 8 years. Because sometimes when you're self-employed, y'all know this ministry, you just, hey, I wonder where my next meal's coming from. Nice to pay these bills this month. Wonder what's going to happen. And I don't know where I was prior to going through kind of a valley experience like that. I don't know if I'd had the courage, and but more importantly, the courage in relationships.
Right.
Yeah.
And one of the things I had to learn was my tendency with people was, if I sensed that I was afraid. I was afraid that if I showed empathy and kindness, and that means I would be taking all their problems on and like carrying their problems. And I'm like, whoa, man, my problems are enough for me. You take care of your stuff, I'll take care of mine.
Right.
Like what I did with my brother when I was a kid. We shared a room, so I'd say, this is the line in the room. Everything on here is me. Everything over there is you. So if his stuff got on my side, I threw it over on his side. And I wasn't very forgiving when his little trash would come over. Yeah. And I learned that you can have empathy, you can invest, and you can help. It doesn't obligate you to do what that person needs to do. And I experienced having people help me through a time that was too much for myself to carry, which would have been my tendency. So as far as where I am today, it's a continuation of that.
Right.
I mean, we enjoy, this sounds kind of hokey, but I guess we're kind of enjoying an abundant life in the sense that, no, I'm not stinking rich and, prosperous in that sense. I mean, God's blessed the business and stuff, but we have a lot of relationships. We're privileged to be, rooted in a church that is very dear to us, and we have relationships that go back 20 years.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where things are today, and a lot of growth. The main growth area has been as a parent.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something I was thinking about, when we talked a few weeks ago. You was talking about where you were when you first found out about Stephen's autism and just where you are with that now.
Yeah, with Stephen's autism, it's a weird thing. And I reposted about a year ago. I just wrote something from the heart. I felt a need to express myself on that, threw it out on Facebook, and people seem to respond to it pretty well.
Right.
Yeah, and that's kind of the reason I really wanted to do this podcast, just because of that.
Right.
It's more of seeing. I think Stephen, more than anything's taught me proper perspective, in the sense that, he's a guy that, like, for example, with my mother, I would say, you did this, you chose this, and that's why these things went bad and our family blew apart.
Right.
And Stephen, I could clearly see, here's a guy, he was born this way. It really wasn't his choice. And it affects him. It affects he has these compulsive things that I would say he almost has to do.
Right.
Because of this condition. And then I saw that purity in there, a joy in there, despite the circumstance. I mean, and that started to work on me personally. And then I'd see him in contact with other people and the effect he had on them. And then I started, ponder about, well, what does it mean? What does it really mean to be in the Spirit? Does it mean that, I'm accomplished at some task? I'm a great athlete. I'm a great minister. I'm a great preacher, or is it just walking with God? And he taught me some things there.
Right.
And he doesn't worry. He doesn't fret. He's not anxious.
Right.
Unless you take his ball away from him.
Right. Right. That was interesting, Mark. You're reading that verse a while ago. Hebrews 10:38. My righteousness, one shall live by faith, and if he shrinks back, my soul has no pleasure in him. But it says in 39, it says, "But we are not of those who shrink back and are destroyed, but of those who have faith and preserve their souls." Then he jumps into, of course, now faith is the assurance of things hoped for and the convictions of things not seen, which during those times when you're numb, like you were describing earlier, and that it just seems so fitting in that process when you're going through, like God doesn't always show up in the midst of that through the senses. You know what I'm saying? There's not a lot of comfort that comes in sometimes when we're, especially when you're wanting a taste from God, or you're wanting to see God work, or you're wanting to do these things, but is realizing that too, that God doesn't change in the midst of what's going on. And oftentimes we'll meet you in the midst of the junk. And JT mentioned a few weeks ago, even just saying probably one of the most sweet times that he has since the presence of God was at his mother's funeral, and just talking about that whole deal and how that was a real moment. He wasn't happy, he wasn't joyful, but he sensed God's presence in that moment, and it was real. And I just can imagine, just some of the stuff that we have all gone through, that people can grab a hold of that in the midst of that and see, if they could taste that one aspect about God and knowing that he is real, and even in the midst of the junk that we deal with, you may not have all the riches material wise. You may not have all the things that it says, that the world says we have to be successful, yet right in the midst of what you're doing, though, you have a sense of the peace of the presence of God. And I think it was Psalm 16:11 too that says that in his presence is fullness of joy. And it doesn't really set out a circumstance there. If the good things are going on, there's not really a moment there where he just sets it out there that in his presence is fullness of joy. And and it's been kind of neat to see you, just over the years that we've gotten to see, we hadn't watched Stephen grow up, in the sense of that you have for sure, but it's been neat to see him over the years, even at the times we've seen him at camp, and just watching y'all's relationship grow with him as well. How's that been for you guys, other than over the years? Is it as far as, I guess where I'm getting at is how's God shown up in that relationship, in the sense with you and your son?
He's shown up in several ways. One, that you just trust him. Mm-hmm. One thing that happened early on was we realized we really couldn't. I mean, how do you teach him about Christ?
Sure.
How are we going to teach Stephen?
Right.
And particularly we're feeling burdened and praying, and God impressed upon him. He says, it's like, oh, how do we talk to him? How will we teach him about him? And God impressed upon him that, I talk to Stephen all the time.
That's awesome.
And so there's comfort, and there's joy, and when you see joy in him, it puts joy in, it puts joy in us.
Right.
The most horrifying thought is to think that he's in pain or he's upset.
Right.
And, maybe he's getting picked on somewhere and he can't tell us and things like that.
Right.
And so, and it's it's tough in the sense that you hit these milestones and you see, the guy or gal, he's the same age. Like he's the same age as Sarah Tucker, for example.
Right.
And you see them hit these milestones in life, and there's Stephen over there bouncing on his ball, and well, he's never going to experience this, and he's never going to experience that, and it just has made us focus on things that are more eternal, particularly in relation to him.
Right.
Because in the end, that's what really counts, and we've had so much joy in him being our child.
Right.
I don't know that I could ever say, God said, "Hey, you want me to heal Stephen?" Probably say yeah.
Right.
But he has purpose in that, and some of it probably will not be seen to the other side.
Right.
So it's it's like life, right?
Right.
You have those things that don't have easy answers.
Right.
And like I said, sometimes the joy, I tell you, what freaked me out the most was, since becoming a Christian in college, when I was saved,
right,
I experienced a good bit of healthy dose of joy, and it'd come and go, anxiety and doubts, but it would return. But that was the longest period, when I moved back, where the joy was gone
right,
for a good 6-8 months, and it freaked me out. I mean, it's almost like you're not getting air.
Yeah.
And I found it very difficult. And I said this to Noel. I mean, if the Lord wasn't here sustaining me and bringing those passages to mind to encourage me to take another step, and having the people coming in and love on me, I said I'd be in a mental institution in a corner with a straitjacket talking to myself. I mean, I had no doubt.
Right. Yeah. Right.
I had no doubt about that.
Wow.
And particularly when you have a mother that was, and then a great grandmother died in an institution, and you have all this family history, and and then you have a son who there's some relation in there with the two. At least some people think, some scholars.
Right.
So I don't know if I answered your question, Jason.
No, you did. No, you did fine. I think it was great. It's just really neat to hear from you in that perspective, because a lot of people deal with exactly the same things that you're dealing with, and have raising a child that's autistic, and they deal with some of the same.
Nice ringtone.
Yeah, thank you. That deal with with some of the same issues, and maybe don't see a light at the end of the tunnel. They don't see hope in what God has done here, and just the precious gift that you have in your son. And that's so cool to hear you talk about it, because it gives me hope. Even as a father to 3 daughters that I have, that I get to, I get to love on these kids and point them to Christ, and sometimes I fight and deal with those things as a parent, going, man, I'm so not adequate to do this, and so, and I feel like that a lot, but it's just really fun to let God do what He is going to do, even in the relationship with my girls, and how He's going to work that out, and how He's going to make it happen. And it's really neat to hear you talk about having peace in the sense of and God conversating with Stephen. That's just cool to me, because God is big enough to do that, and He's just mysterious enough to make that happen in such a way that you don't ever think about those things, when you're not dealing with it straight home. So
yeah.
Well, thanks for.
I tell you,
yeah, go ahead.
Expectations are a hell of a thing.
Right.
And I think that's where a lot of the trouble is. I mean, whether your child has special needs or not, you get this little script going in your head. You want to see things go a certain way. And in America, we like to make sure that happens. So
we do. You're
so
right.
It's easy to put more on ourselves than we should be.
Right. Well,
but I tell you what, with Stephen, it kind of brought it clear to me. It was like, boy, you ain't got a chance.
Right.
to really get all this done and get him what he needs. It just was too big. And,
right.
But it is the beginning of the process of realizing that, this whole life is too big. It's God that's going to sustain us and bring us through.
Right. It's such a big truth for us to grab a hold of and to really grab a big chunk of it and try to bite into that and chew as much of it as we can, because it's really important for us to see that life is about being dependent and living dependent upon God and really just in every aspect of it. And I'm learning, and I'm still learning that. I'm still grabbing hold of those truths and those concepts and really applying them to my life, and just realizing that I can't even just begin to fathom that I can do this on my own and try to make it make sense and stuff. So, man, Mark, it's really good to talk with you. It's really good to hear from you, and it's good to hear what God is doing in you and in your family. And I really appreciate you sharing today and being open and honest with us and just sharing your heart.
Yeah, no problem. I was going to just tell you, everything's good. God has blessed us. We got a lot of money in the bank and take 2 vacations a year, and everybody's healthy and happy. Praise the Lord. But
Right.
I decided to tell you the truth.
Well, I appreciate that. That's because I'd rather hear the truth than
Yeah.
Man.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Right. Oh man, listen, you're and I just want to say this one last thing. Your son 2 summers ago talked me into. He came and he pulled me aside and said, "Jason," he says, "you got to do something in honor of my father." I said, "Oh man," I said, I could smell what he was cooking in the kitchen. You know what I'm saying? He was. They did the. I think they did the work staff skit, and what ended up happening was he come out and they were doing the doctor skit. And he came and told me, he says, "Hey man, I want you to. My dad says you do the best goose that he's ever heard." And so,
you did the goose,
I
and
did.
I missed it.
I know.
Oh, love the goose. I used to love when Jason did the goose.
And
Philip, I still think they're the 2 funniest guys ever on this.
man, I tell you what, and I was worn out when I got off the stage doing that. My voice, I couldn't talk the next day. I was like, "Man, what's happening?" Somebody told me, "You're getting old." I said, "Thanks."
Yeah.
So, in honor of you, and plus, I think he had a faint memory of me yelling really loud. Is what he said. Yeah, that's right. And so, but it was fun to do that in honor of you. So, anyways, thanks for coming to join us today and being patient with us as we get this, get all these little kinks worked out here. And thanks for sharing your heart. And please join us again soon.
Anytime, and I'll be listening.
Okay.
All right.
So thanks, Mark, and we will see you guys next week.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.